Hello everyone, my name's Elliot and I'm here to present the cons argument for the topic entitled Meat, the Future is Rosy. Now it turns out that this is easier said than done because on a global scale meat consumption is actually on the increase. The overall trend is driven by poultry, although red meat outstrips poultry in the USA where meat consumption is 3 times the global average. And all this despite all the universally publicised warnings that we get every day from direct health effects such as obesity, cancer, heart disease, to environmental concerns like deforestation, loss of biodiversity, and the acceleration of climate change due to greenhouse gas emissions from livestock. Some hard facts are that 70% of global deforestation is for the purposes of growing animal food. 33% of arable land is also used to grow animal food, and 14.5% of all anthropogenic greenhouse gases come from livestock. So every day the global media is feeding us a constant menu of scaremongering, whistleblowing and finger-wagging, with a side order of best-selling books like Eric Schlosser's 2001 book, Fast Food Nation, which became a film, and actual box office documentaries like Super Size Me, which was nominated for an Oscar despite its fundamentally unrealistic and rather silly concept. Because after all, who in their right mind would eat nothing but McDonald's for a month? But even so, when I was a child, you couldn't enjoy a sausage or a pork pie without someone saying you wouldn't eat it if you knew what was in it. Well, back then that might have been true, but nowadays we're all older, wiser, and less blissfully ignorant. And thanks to the information superhighway, we usually do know what's in these things, and yet we still eat them. It's also clear that consumer behaviour is driven by marketing, or at least image. People just believe the hype. So despite meat consumption increasing, the stats actually show that it's happening at a progressively slower rate, because as we become more informed, we're becoming more concerned about issues like animal welfare and food safety. But that said, consumers are nothing if not fickle. So take bird flu. Despite all the headlines and short-term rise in the sale of face masks, it's ultimately had no significant effect on poultry consumption. So in the face of all this, it's difficult to argue that the future of meat isn't rosy. So rather than trying to fight the facts, it might be actually more useful to ask why. Why aren't we ditching beef bourguignon for bean casseroles or T-bones for tofu? Well, we know that cutting down on meat is not only good for our health and for the health of the planet. Unfortunately, while consumers generally agree that they could make dietary changes for the better, it's been shown that their expressed beliefs are only moderately aligned to their actual behaviour, meaning that what we say isn't always reflected in what we do. So, for instance, people express concern about animal welfare, but research shows that they're only prepared to pay a moderate premium for organic or ethically produced meat. And then many dietary decisions purely come down to cost. Relatively speaking, fresh fruit, nuts and vegetables are not cheap. Besides which, fruit and veg only have a short shelf life. It's actually been shown that the relationship between meat consumption and income follows what they call an inverted U-curve. What this means is that as developing countries grow economically, the population eats more meat. Thus, meat consumption can be viewed as an indicator of wealth, until a point where people get so rich that they can afford to ditch meat and live off the finest truffles and rarest berries. But of course I'm joking. But for many, it's simply a matter of taste. Come the breakfast table, bacon tastes better than bran. Aside from that, attitudes to vegetarianism are driven by a wide variety of factors, from cultural and religious to philosophical and purely geographical. But the fact is that tendencies on both sides of the argument can be influenced by peer pressure and good old-fashioned human obstinacy. Which brings us to advertising. We're all aware of the global 5-a-day campaign, but while we know that the message is sent with the best intentions, we're also resistant to being told what's good for us. Nobody likes being nannied. It also doesn't help that the promotion of the vegetarian lifestyle can often come across as preachy, worthy and boringly wholesome. So take this Greenpeace ad for example. Yum. On the other hand, meaty fast food always looks a treat. They even make it sound fun, bombarding our senses with zingers, whoppers, flamers and pounders. And as we all know, pepperami is a bit of an animal. even if we're not sure which bit. So globalisation obviously has a lot to answer for, but surely it should work both ways. Given that rice is the staple food for over half the world's population and thus the main food crop, why don't the rest of us eat more of it? Moreover, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization report that global fruit and vegetable production is actually increasing, and especially in China. The problem is that fruit and veg have doubled in price since 1988. And it's also worth noting that while producing and consuming the bulk of the world's rice, developing Asia is actually increasing its meat consumption by 3% a year and dairy consumption by 5%. The FAO actually predicts that global meat and milk consumption will double in the 21st century. So as I said, globalisation's got a lot to answer for. Of course, I can't end any discussion about alternatives to meat without mentioning soybeans. Naturally, this inevitably prompts the counter-argument that soybean production is as bad for the rainforests as the meat industry. It's a much mooted point, but soybeans also come with the additional transportation impact in that whoever consumes the soy has to bring it in from where it's grown, which is mainly South America. So, like it or not, the future is rosy for meat. But you could say that the alternatives are more compelling. They just need a better agent.